Thanks for joining us this afternoon and welcome to our session. Today we'll hear from different transport modes about the type of training they receive on disability awareness and equalities. Most of you know me already, but my name is Emma Scott. I'm the Deputy Chief Executive at Disability Equality Scotland. Can I just check before we start, everyone can hear me okay? Want to give me a wave or yeah, lots of hands up, great. So before we start, let me just explain a little bit about how today's session will run and how you can interact with us. So you'll see already today we're in a meeting format, and that means that you have the choice to have your camera on or off, as well as your microphone. Can I just remind everyone, please, to keep themselves on mute unless you're invited to speak? This helps to cut down on any of the background noise and distractions. You can also choose to have your camera on or off, but again, can I ask that if you are speaking, please do have your camera on, as this helps us in terms of inclusive communication. We do have some BSL users with us today, so being able to see the speaker does help. What would also be useful is if the name that you have on display on your screen is the name that you registered under and one that we can use to identify you with. So as I said, we've got BSL interpreters with us today. If you do need BSL and you haven't told us in advance, just pop a little note in the chat and we can make sure that we can connect you up with the interpreter. But we also have live captioning provided today. If you want to see the captions on screen, these can be accessed via the closed captions button at the bottom of the screen, where you can click on the show subtitle button. And if you click on that setting, you can change the size of the captions that appear on your screen. But also, if you're using a screen reader, you can change the alerts that are read out to you, including the messages that appear in the chat, which can be quite distracting. But you can find all that under settings and accessibility. But any problems at all or technical difficulties using Zoom, please just type it into the chat and Ali will do his best behind the scenes to resolve that for you. We are recording today's webinar as well. This allows us to share the link afterwards. So if you don't want to be recorded, please just keep your camera off. And then as usual, after today's session, you will receive a short evaluation survey. Please do take the time just to give us some feedback. It does help us to plan ahead for the next one. Great, so that's all the housekeeping out of the way. Let me just then take a few minutes to tell you about today's session. So you might remember back in November 2021, Disability Equality Scotland held a similar webinar discussion, and it was on the topic of assistance cards for use on public transport. And in that session, we heard from our members and other disabled people about their experiences of using cards on the transport network, and that quite often transport staff maybe didn't recognise the card or understand what it was for, and therefore they weren't able to provide the support that that disabled passenger needed. But we also know that one of the key outcomes in the accessible travel framework is about ensuring everyone involved in delivering transport services can help enable disabled people to make a successful journey. So that kind of led us to today's session, where we're really interested to find out more about the training that transport staff receive in general about disabilities and other equalities considerations. And we want to find out more about how that training is designed and how it's delivered to transport staff. But really importantly, we want to know how that translates to the day-to-day journeys that disabled people make. What impact does that training have on a disabled person's journey? So today, what we're going to do is we'll hear, first of all, from different modes of transport about the training that they have. Then after a very short comfort break, we'll come back and there'll be an opportunity to put your questions to the panel. So to get started today, let me just introduce our presenters we have with us. We're delighted to welcome, first of all, Claire Clark, who's the Senior Executive Officer for the Office of Rail and Road. We've got Robb with us, Customer Services Director for NorthLink Ferries. We have Cheryl Campbell, who's the Airport Services Manager at Inverness Airport, but also can speak about HIAL and Highlands and Islands airports in general. And we've got Robert Burns with us, the Stakeholder Engagement Officer from FirstBus. Thank you guys for joining us today. So what I'll do first of all is just hand straight over and we'll hear from Claire Clark from the ORR. Claire, you want to just take over?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Emma. I'm just going to share my screen. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay, so you should be able to see that. Is that all right with everyone? Okay. Okay, brilliant. Let's do this. Well, first of all, thanks. It's great to be here with you to talk about the training that we've been doing, focusing on the last couple of years, basically on the delivery of staff training on disability awareness in the rail industry. Let's start with the basics. So how we work. So the rail regulator issues licenses to station and train operators. So these licenses require operators to establish and comply with something called an accessible travel policy, and that must meet the requirements of our guidance. So way back in 2018, we went about conducting research and engaging with key stakeholders, including Margaret Hickish, who helped us to analyse operators' existing training materials. We found that there was a real lack of consistency across all rail operators in terms of what they were delivering on the ground. So as a result of this work, we proposed a new training framework for the industry. So the framework comprises of 9 training outcomes and forms the basis of our revised guidance document, which was published back in 2019. So the purpose of the framework is to ensure that rail operators understand disabled people and their everyday challenges when travelling by rail. And I'll just quickly run through what those outcomes cover. So they include awareness of the Equality Act and its requirements for reasonable adjustments. It looks at the definition of disability. It explores the social model of disability. It recognises that there are a range of disabilities, including visible and non-visible, that may require assistance. And it ensures that rail staff understand what it means to communicate effectively to all of those passenger groups. It introduces the relevant regulations and policies focused on disability, and it makes sure that rail operators understand what passenger assistance is. So that's booked assistance and unbooked assistance, and how that works for disabled people and how those rail staff play an important part in delivering that service. And finally, the framework ensures that staff can identify the actual accessible features of the stations that they work in, and also, you know, the broader network, the destination stations, so that they can provide that safe and effective assistance. Okay, so we've got the training outcomes. So on top of that, we introduce specific requirements for actually how it's going to be delivered on the ground. So that includes induction training for all new staff, including those in senior roles, which means that everyone now receives training in our outcomes when they join their organisation. We set a major deadline of the 31st of July 2021, so last year, for operators to ensure all of their frontline staff, so these are station teams, these are onboard guards, etc., all receive training in those 9 training outcomes in a predominantly classroom-based setting. We also set requirements on the importance of lived experience and expertise of people with a range of disabilities, and that this is utilised in the development and also the delivery of the training. So including the fact that rail staff must hear from disabled people about their experience of rail travel, and that there is a safe space to explore the issues raised. And then we also introduced the fact that there should be ongoing refresher training. So this should be delivered every 2 years, and it requires the disability training, which covers all of the training, all of the 9 training outcomes, to be delivered to all of frontline staff every 2 years. And finally, I've just added at the end of that slide is that we ensured that the elements of the training extended to contact centre staff and to temporary or agency staff. So those staff who are, for example, taking bookings for assistance and advising passengers on their journey. So we work with around 26 operators to make sure, so we need to make sure that these requirements were met and they continue to be met. So therefore monitoring is such a crucial part of our work. So in the lead up to July last year, every rail operator had to submit a progress report midway through the development of their training. We engaged with each accessibility lead on a regular basis where we had concerns, and there were concerns, particularly at the beginning stages of developing their training. We stepped up our monitoring and prescribed targets to be met by set dates. Obviously, the pandemic had a huge impact on the delivery of training and the ability to hold classroom-based training. So a number of operators needed to start from scratch and redesign their approach. So it was imperative that we monitored this closely to make sure that the new approach still met our requirements. So some examples of kind of satisfactory transitioning from classroom-based environment include delivery via MS Teams or Zoom, in small groups with facilitators and guest speakers who have a disability. Some operators held webinars with panel members who have a range of disabilities, answering questions and talking about their experience. Some operators have actually carried out individual visits to stations to carry out the training to small teams. There's been some really good examples of kind of rail operators utilising their existing network of disabled people, either that's through the kind of the forums that they've set up or just engaging with their regular disabled passengers for them to share their experience. Examples where we got proposals to adapt to the pandemic environment which were not satisfactory, which we pushed back on, were things like e-learning packages. So rail staff logging on, kind of reading from a script and from a computer or a smartphone, and then having a conversation with the line manager as a follow-up. So we made clear that this type of delivery method doesn't fully satisfy our requirements, in particular the importance of engaging with disabled people and learning from lived experience. So, key findings. It's now, we are confident to say that over 30,000 members of rail staff who interact with passengers in the normal course of their duties will have received refresher disability awareness training. Around half of the rail operators have developed brand new courses to be used in staff inductions and ongoing refresher training. At least 11 operators have extended their frontline staff training to cover all staff. So that includes people, CEO, leadership, all of those senior roles. So we're confident that operators are in a much better position in terms of being able to adapt to the current working environment and being able to deliver effective training. And we're really pleased to report that training methods have shifted from the logging on, the kind of the reading from the screen or the phone, to actually incorporating lived experience of people with disabilities. And that's been embedded in the development of the training and the ongoing refresher training as well. So what's next? So now that all this work has been implemented, we can start monitoring its impact. It is safe to say that passenger numbers have been particularly low for obvious reasons. So we've been unable to detect an immediate shift in behaviour, but now that it's starting to pick up, we're hoping to get hold of some robust evidence. So we do this, we collect evidence via several ways. We'll be asking for reports from rail operators on the delivery of their ongoing refresher training. We deliver an annual passenger assist survey, which captures the experience of around 5,000 passengers and their booked assistance journeys. We collect periodic data on operator performance. So areas like assistance reliability and the submission of redress claims. And we continue to conduct mystery shopping exercises. So we're about to produce a report. We've been working with the Research Institute for Disabled Consumers. And this is all about the turn up and go assistance, so the unbooked assistance to unstaffed and partially staffed stations. So capturing the experience of passengers who've gone out and carried out some mystery shopping for us. And just to add at the end, we review rail operators' accessible travel policies on an annual basis. So we continue to hold them to account via that route as well. And finally, I'm just going to plug a podcast that we do. So just before the end of last year, we interviewed Network Rail, Merseyrail, Thameslink and Great Northern about how their approach was to delivering their staff training. So that's worth a listen to if you get a chance. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Claire. That's really helpful. If anybody has any questions for Claire, if you want to start popping them into the chat, and we'll get the chance to put them to her later on. And in the meantime, we will circulate all of the slides after the event as well, so you will get the chance to catch up on some of that information and check out her podcast in more detail. Okay, thank you for that. We'll move on now to the next presenter, and I'll hand over to Billy Robb from NorthLink. Billy, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll just give you a quick sort of introduction. So my name's Billy Robb, from NorthLink Ferries. We just to give a sort of brief overview of the company. We have the ferries from Aberdeen up to Kirkwall and Lerwick in the Orkney and Shetlands, and also we have the Hamerville, which goes from Scrabston up to Stromness. So it's a shorter crossing. Sort of two different types of business, but all with the sort of different types of demands. Our parent company is Circle. They're committed to removing the barriers and changing perceptions about disabilities, impairments and health conditions. They, especially as a part of the Viable 500, and they've got a pledge to strengthen the recruitment process, give all the colleagues the support they need to do their jobs. At our level, at NorthLink Ferries itself, the staff play an important role to ensure the appropriate access to the ferry service, being both aware and considerate of the issues that are being presented, and it's essential that a pleasant experience from ship to shore during the voyage. NorthLink Ferries, we design training programs, some external, but we are now looking at some internal processes as well to educate the staff. Training's been undertaken to ensure all staff are familiar with the current legislation and safety procedures, including drills. And this covers actions, which slightly different, which, in case of an emergency situations, how we manage that with the different types of passengers we carry. Currently, we are ongoing with disability awareness training. We are accredited with the World Host, and we're actually currently doing that. It started last week and it's been rolled out to all our customer facing staff. This is provided by external training company. It's a one-day fully interactive course currently facilitated through the teams, and as previously mentioned, we're hoping to get a more sort of face-to-face course once the COVID situation eases a bit. And some of the parts of the course, just to give you sort of flavour of it, it's identifying the customers with different needs, the impact of not providing accessible services, keywords, phrases, putting yourself in somebody else's place, common disabilities, planning for action, the equity, the reframe of disability, and even the aging population and how we manage that. And there's positives and negatives. If a customer with a disability comes on and they have a positive experience with us, it speaks volumes. Everybody, they tell 2 people, 4, 8, 16, and the numbers go up. But there's always a negative spin if you don't do it right, and and you say, okay, what happens when that? If something's done wrong, or the customer satisfied, and the passenger could feel unwelcome, undervalued. There may be frustration and anger. You know, and this is the risk to the companies if they don't do it right, the training is not done, and you know, or you don't have the facilities there to actually facilitate it. You know, the passenger could be likely to make a register or a complaint. The influence to the business, yeah, negative reputation, loss of customers, and there's potential legal consequences there as well. So it's, you know, you can't emphasize the importance of correct training, plus having the infrastructure, the hardware there in place as well. And you know, one of the things we have done, you know, pre-COVID was in 2019 was to introduce the change in places facilities, which we've got on all our vessels. That's the Rossi, the Hamerville, and the Yatland. So they were installed in 2019. Haven't been much used to date, but I'm sure once we get in sort of normal service, once COVID eases again, we will see a better uptake with that. Other things we're looking to do once we go out of COVID is to, what we'd actually did do before was have relevant groups to visit ships or even travel with us to provide sort of feedback on our facilities, both afloat and ashore actually. And you know we're always open to to new ideas. You know, we don't want to sit back and rest on our laurels. You know, we're keen to listen. You know, that could, we had like autism groups and visual impaired groups come on and sort of test our facilities. So we're quite keen to progress with that again once we're pretty much allowed to do that. Moving on for some more internal training, Fiash came up from Disabilities Scotland there on the 11th of February, I think it was, when he brought the weather with him, which is great, up in British sunshine up to Aberdeen here. This involved doing some filming. That was an initial introduction from our managing director Stuart Garrett here, and also one of our Aberdeen supervisors, Agus Heyman. And what we're going to do with this is use it as building blocks to produce an internal training program for existing and sort of new members of staff as well. And that's ongoing. In fact, we have a call about this after this one here. And another thing we sort of look at, and we know there's physical disabilities there, but some disabilities we can't see. And what we're also doing is conducting a training scheme for mental health first aiders. This is a 2-day course, and it provides a general understanding which aims to remove the stigma, fear, and more importantly, just to give confidence to approach a person in distress. Some of the subjects involved with this be listening skills, the impact of alcohol and drugs on mental health, understanding depression, how to offer first aid to someone experiencing anxiety. So we're going to be starting that within the next month. So that's, you know, we're continuously moving forward. Other applications we're looking at, and it's there's not a lot more to do with training. It's more like, well, there will be actually. We are using the Welcome Me app. Judith Little from Welcome Me. It's a web. I'll give you a sort of description of it. It's a web. Well, it's an app-based platform. It's also web-based as well, which allows any customers with requirements to advise of the prior to the boarding any requirements they need to, if they need to be met at the terminal. We can link it to the booking service. They can describe what their disability might be, and so we're aware before the customer arrives at the terminal, and then we can sort of fulfill the whole journey all the way through. So we're in dialogue with Welcome Me at the minute. They're making some slight changes to their web platform there, so that's ongoing at the minute. And just another thing, just a wee plug for NorthLink Ferries. You know, the website's been designed now in a way with assistive technology such as screen readers, Recite Me, different font changes. So you please feel free, have a look, and we'll welcome to any sort of feedback. And if you're on the website as well, please have a look at our inclusive travel guide. And once again, we're always open to ideas. So all in all, I think we want to keep the training. The training will be ongoing, and we need to keep refreshing it. And we're always welcome for sort of new ideas, and how we can do things better. So, and I'm sure we will. We're definitely in the right direction, and so that's really pretty much it for me.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Billy. That's great. There's some questions coming through in the chat, but I'll sit on them for a while until we come back to our Q&A session in a moment. And I'll move straight on to hear from Cheryl Campbell. Cheryl, are you all right to take over and give us a quick update from you?
Yes, no problem. Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me all right. I will firstly apologise that my camera is not working, so unfortunately you'll be unable to see me, but hopefully I can still keep you interested in talking through everything I can in terms of training within HIAL and specifically Inverness Airport. So I'm the Airport Services Manager here within Inverness. So that means that my remit covers the responsibility of ensuring that our terminal is as accessible as is possible. As the largest of the HIAL 11 airports, we are kind of luckier in the sense that we have a dedicated special assistance team here. So anyone requiring assistance is able to pre-book that through their airline, and we then know who we're expecting, how many people we're expecting that may need assistance, and what type of assistance that is. So we are usually pre-notified of any requirements that our passengers do have, but we do still assist anyone that may attend the airport that hasn't pre-booked that. So previous to the initiatives that we have coming in the not so distant future, the majority of our customer facing staff did complete what's already been mentioned, the e-learning modules on their computers, where they kind of click through the information, which as everyone is agreeing with so far is not the best way to find that training and to fully understand what our passengers that need further assistance actually require from us. Our dedicated team have a really robust and thorough training regime that they go through because they are physically assisting our passengers on and off of aircraft, but our general customer facing staff only had that e-learning opportunity. We were one of the first airports in the UK to take part in the Sunflower Lanyard scheme. Hopefully you're familiar with the scheme, but essentially that just allows someone to come in comfortably, showing that they may need a little bit of assistance during their journey. It means our staff can identify that that person might need some assistance, and our staff that had completed the relevant training associated display the Sunflower badge as well. So it means if you're aware of the scheme, you know the members of staff that should be able to help you with some additional assistance. We've also engaged for many years with our local access panels. The closest one to ourselves is in Nairn, and they have been a great fountain of knowledge for us and great feedback. So we take on anything that we get from them to help us improve training and share any of those messages. So very recently we have engaged with a third party to provide us with a training package that can be rolled out to all of our customer facing staff. So that third party company is Skywise, and they have provided us with a vast amount of training materials so that we can provide classroom-based training now for all customer-facing staff. So that covers our security team, our information desk team, the teams on check-in desks, and even the teams that would be serving you within the cafe areas here at the airport. So we all have the best understanding we can to provide the best experience that we can. We are in the process now of beginning to roll that out with Train the Trainer across the whole HIAL group of airports. And those slides are massive banks with different topics, so they cover such a wide range of materials. So the aims of them are to make sure that we are setting appropriate quality standards for assistance, providing the tools to our staff to provide a first-class assistance enabling service, and adjusting their services to make sure that they meet the particular needs of any passenger. So that covers all hidden disabilities, as well as any visible, the best ways to communicate, and to make sure that we are asking anyone how we can best help them, to make sure that we customise that assistance to every individual, because everyone has different requirements, and making sure that our information is always clear. Travelling through the airport is always a stressful journey for everyone, and we just want to eliminate that stress for any and all passengers that travel through the airport. So we need to make sure that that is addressed for absolutely everyone. So the training is mainly focused on how we best communicate what type of support is required, and that is based on a lot of real life examples and experiences. And because we have went to a third party that does supply this for a variety of airports, they have been able to bring in lots of different experiences from different size airports as well, so that we can really appreciate how important what we do is and how that can impact on someone's experience. Specifically, going through security is the most stressful situation for everyone, and in particular if you have additional requirements, or you are carrying anything with you that may be unusual if our staff were unaware. So we do a lot of training that's based on that, to make sure that our staff can be as sensitive as they can to anything that you might be carrying with you, and to ensure that they are providing the best experience. So our special assistance team will normally, if requested, assist from the car park right all the way through to going onto the aircraft. So they do assist through security as well, so they can make sure that every aspect of the journey is explained and that you're comfortable with that process. We have, as a way of taking it forward as well, included in our contract with the special assistance team that we would like them to provide even further training with the rest of our customer facing team, so they fully understand the process that our passengers go through. So that's included going forward, and we will look to them to potentially provide classroom training, as well as the trainers that we have within our own kind of groups of staff across the various airports. And we evaluate the training that we have through CAA surveys. So the Civil Aviation Authority makes sure that we as airports operate in the way that we have to in terms of various different criteria, but they do look at assistance, and we hand out the survey details, and they are available on the CAA website to be able to provide us with feedback. The best way to get feedback from our passengers is once they've been through the entire journey. So they are provided with the link to fill in the surveys once they've gotten home and have reflected on the performance. That goes directly to the Civil Aviation Authority, and they send the results to us, so they are able to see and assess how well we are doing, and we can do the same. So it's a really good way of us assessing how we do, and the Civil Aviation Authority provide us with a rating, and a massive amount of that is based on those surveys, so the real life experience of our passengers. And of course, any comments within them give us an opportunity to improve and potentially adjust our training. We also recently have engaged with Access Able. They are doing surveys of all the airports within the HIAL group so that we can provide accessibility guides on our websites. So if you haven't travelled from Inverness Airport previously and you wanted to familiarise yourself before travelling, then it has all the measurements from various points. It has photos of various points within the airport, and it gives you a really good idea of exactly what to expect. So we are trying to make every step that we can to make it an easier transition through the airport for anyone who might need to travel, and that we try to excel beyond the kind of guidance that is in place. So we have legislation that we need to adhere to in terms of waiting times for assistance provided for those who have booked. But we also have best practice guidance as well, and we do our very best to make sure that we are doing everything in there so that we are providing that great level of service that we strive for. And I think that gives a good overview of what we do here within HIAL and Inverness Airport. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Cheryl. That's great. That was a really good overview of everything that's happening through HIAL, so thank you for that. And finally then, I'll pass over to Robert Burns from FirstBus. Robert's been on quite a few of our webinars before. He's a bit of a veteran here now, but we'll, I'm sure you'll get a grilling later on, Robert. But over to you. You can tell us what's happening at FirstBus.
Thanks very much, Emma. Hello, everyone. For anyone that may be new to the forum, I'm Robert Burns. I'm the Stakeholder Engagement Officer for FirstBus across Scotland. And FirstBus have got quite a large presence in the public transport sector. We operate one of the largest bus networks across Greater Glasgow and Lanarkshire. We also have a considerable presence in the Forth and Clyde Valley, and also from West Lothian into Edinburgh. And we also have a city network in the northeast in Aberdeen. And we also do tour bus services in Edinburgh under the Bright Bus Tours brand. In terms of accessible training that drivers go through, we have a very intensive training programme that every driving colleague goes through. It kicks off from the moment they join the business. There are a number of different strands to it. The most obvious strand will be to familiarise the driver with the accessible functions of the fleet of vehicles that we operate in the areas that we serve. And that will be from things like ramp deployment, how to do that safely, alongside bus infrastructure, such as raised curbs, and how that works best to give accessibility the best chance of working successfully as the bus moves along the road, to other factors such as recognising when the accessibility space, when someone wants to go off the bus, that there's a difference in the audible sound, so that makes the driver aware that some assistance may be required for someone on board that may wish to alight the vehicle. And then there's the actual social interaction, is probably the best way to describe it, whereby drivers give support to passengers as they board and alight the vehicle. And those go hand in hand. So at the point of them joining the business, they, as well as driver training and on-street training, they will go through a classroom process that we like to call journey makers, because drivers make the journey. Apologies for the pun, but they are very much the integral part of any passenger's journey, from where they board the bus, throughout the journey, to when they leave the bus. The driver is the linchpin to it all. So it's important that drivers are aware that assistance to anyone that may have a visible or a hidden disability is integral to having a smooth and comfortable journey with us, wherever they may be travelling to. In terms of how we train. It's a kind of a classroom format, and we have a number of different modules within Journey Makers that cover various situations. It may be, for example, it will focus on someone with a sight impairment, someone with a hearing impairment. Also, it covers strands such as hidden disabilities, someone that may have a learning impairment, or something not immediately obvious, for example, autism. All of these have separate strands within the training programme, and we tease out the training within that process through a number of formats, such as training slides, filmed interactions that tease out role play, and from there drivers are then able to learn best practice on what makes them a great driver in terms of providing a service that will ease the journey for anyone that requires assistance at any point in their trip. This goes on an initial point when they join the business, but it's important to note as well that we continue that training on a periodic basis so that the various messages are continually reinforced and that we get the best from our drivers to deliver a great service for everyone that uses our service, whether that be passengers and everyone that requires assistance. We also, what's probably a little bit lesser known, is we actually give drivers a very brief, gentle introduction to British Sign Language. And we, within that Journey Makers programme, we give them the 8 most simple signs relevant to a journey. So that could be the simple greetings such as hello, goodbye, please may I see your pass, where are you going, and if in a situation maybe the driver's unable to expand within a conversation, sorry, I do not understand. So it gives the very, very basic introductory tools to sign with someone, should that be a requirement. But we also give drivers out with Journey Makers the opportunity to then develop with our Learning and Support Centre to sign up for a British Sign Language course, should they wish to explore that avenue further. And the company are very good at supporting any drivers that wish to go into expansive learning that may help further enhance the journey experience for everyone. In terms of interactions with different bodies, we sometimes bring in visitors that may have a mobility impairment, or may have a hearing impairment or visual impairment, to one of those classes. Appreciate though, with COVID, we have been restricted in how we've been able to do that, but we are hopeful that with things gradually opening back up, we will be able to return to visiting sessions that enhance what we already have in place with our training packages, as there's nothing greater or more important than real interaction and examples from real service users. So in the past, we've used swap with me examples, so that drivers obviously can then have an experience on what it's like for someone with a disability, whether it be seen or hidden, and really to put themselves in the other person's shoes and learn from that process. We also work with other partners such as guide dogs. That allows drivers to recognise that training puppies effectively become guide dogs that help people with visual impairments, There's a whole host of different things and tools that people that wish assistance with accessibility have available to them, and it's important that that is recognised once they qualify and then go out onto the road to help deliver the services that we do. That just about covers it in terms of how we train the drivers. The training obviously is supported by our training academies. They have dedicated staff that roll out these programs, but they also have one final thing I would give is that they also have an important role as well. So, for example, people that may have mobility scooters and require a permit pass to travel, we will assist that process in terms of the process in obtaining the permit pass. That involves going through a small test within the bus to make sure you're able to park the scooter. We will assist in terms of getting a bus out to a location if it's your home address, provided the road setup allows us to attend with the bus. Then we can do that as close to your home as possible. Or if you're more comfortable coming to visit at one of our depots, we will certainly accommodate that process too. And again, it's all about lots of different strands, but they all pull together collectively to help deliver a great travelling experience for everyone that comes to travel with us.
Lovely, thanks Robert, that's great. Thank you to all of our presenters this afternoon for that really helpful overview of the training that each of these modes employs. We've done quite a lot of talking at you so far, and there will be the chance for you in just a moment to ask some questions to our panel. But what we're going to do is kind of finish this first part of the session. We'll have a quick comfort break now to allow our communication support to have a break. And if we can ask you all to come back here just before 2:30, so in 10 minutes time, and then we will be able to get through some of the questions that are already coming through in the chat. So thank you for listening so far, and we'll see you in just a moment and we'll get through some of these questions. So see you in 10. Thanks everyone. Great, welcome back everybody. Thank you for coming back to join us. We'll now have the chance to ask the panel some questions either about the presentations you heard earlier or anything else that you have in mind. But let me just very quickly reintroduce the panel to you. Claire is still with us from the Office of Rail and Road, Cheryl's here from HIAL, Billy's here from NorthLink Ferries, and Robert from FirstBus. But also joining us at this point is Olivia from Lothian Buses. Olivia is the Accessibility and Inclusion Officer, so thank you for joining us at this point, Olivia, that's really helpful. Inevitably, we won't get to all of your questions today, so rest assured anything that we get through the chat, we will put to the panel after today's session, and we will circulate responses along with a little summary paper. So you will get a response to your question, it might just not be today. So some questions have been coming through the chat already. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. I'm going to start just with a question or a series of questions that were for Claire, if that's okay. And they came from Linda. Linda, do you want to ask your question yourself, or do you want me to do it for you?
I'm quite happy for you to do it because I need to go back into the chat to read them out.
No worries at all. Okay, so Claire, Linda was asking about how the ORR's disability awareness training links to the Department of Transport's real training packages. Can you say anything about DFT and real from what your experience has been?
Yeah. So they're entirely separate packages. So they were developed in different times. So our training package or framework was developed before 2019. And I believe the DFT framework or training package was developed shortly after. So in actual fact, rail operators had already established their training packages. It's a bit of a shame, and then the DFT introduced theirs. But We work closely with that team who developed that package, and they kind of align, but there are some differences, but also some similarities. But we call something called the outliers, which are kind of like charter operators or heritage railways. So they need an accessible travel policy when they run, part of their network runs on the national rail network. And what we do is we advise them to look and basically take up that DFT training, because it's very helpful for that type of smaller operator to get that support when it comes to delivering accessibility training for their staff. So yeah, I hope that's explained it.
Thanks, Claire. That's great. So does the training pick up on common themes that can be used to improve the passenger experience? And one other final point from Linda was about the UK Rail Disability Ambassador. Do you have much dealings with that person?
Yeah, so on the ambassador, yes. So the former one, I think they changed last year. So he was involved in a lot of the development and the key stakeholder work that we did in the lead up to our revised published accessible travel policy guidance. And he retains his membership of our external accessible travel forum, which meets biannually. And he sits as to provide his expert advice on key kind of policy issues that come up. And also with the new ambassador, we worked with her very closely as part of the Network Rail delivery of their accessible travel policy. And we will continue to work closely with them to consult on kind of policy issues that come up. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Claire, that's helpful. Billy, I can see you have your hand up. Did you want to come in at this point with a question? That's you unmuted. Can you go, Billy?
I did, yes. If you give me a wee minute. Oh, unmute. There we go. Can you hear me?
That's great, Billy. On you go.
Right, no problem. My question is for it's mainly concerning Stagecoach, but it doesn't really matter anyway. It's basically this. A few years ago, I took part in an event called Swap With Me, which was organised by RNIB Scotland. And it was mainly focusing on the attitude of bus drivers towards those who were partially sighted. And I'm going to quickly tell you how the Swap With Me event came about. And basically, I was getting on a bus to go and meet my mum, and got on, scanned my bus pass, that was fine. And I made my way to a seat, but the bus driver didn't wait for me to sit down. He pulled away from the bus stop. He didn't wait for me to sit down. And because of that, I stumbled, but luckily I didn't fall, thank God. And my question is this: what type of training are you providing that basically covers attitudes? And when I say attitudes, I'm talking about the attitude of drivers towards passengers, because I can tell you hundreds of times when I've been on a bus and the driver's attitude towards people, not just people with disabilities, just people in general. The driver's attitude towards people has been absolutely inexcusable. It's been ridiculous and uncalled for. They've not been rude or anything, but their attitude's just been uncalled for. So what type of training can you or are you offering right now that covers attitude to drivers, that's basically teaching them not to be nasty, to be polite at all times?
Thanks, Billy. That's a great question. Olivia, Rob, do you guys want to come in from a bus perspective?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so within Loathing in Buses, it's kind of part of our disability awareness training, but also a big part of our general communication training is that we need our drivers to understand that we can't teach them how to communicate differently with every different person that comes on, but that a certain level of respect and patience just needs to be imparted across all customers that come onto our buses, because we don't know the amount of non-visible disabilities, hidden disabilities as well. Like you said, you don't know what someone's needs are, what someone's struggling with that day. So a general good level of communication is key. Now, it's really difficult in recruitment to always really get an understanding of what someone's communication and patience and that kind of thing is. But we really try and impart that with our fundamental knowledge training and with our CPC training that we do year after year after year. And what we do there is we put in elements of kind of conflict resolution as well. So teaching our drivers that by apologizing for something that's happened, it's not saying, yes, it's my fault that that's happened, but it's starting to de-escalate that situation. It's trying to help them understand that they are supported by all of the business behind them, but then they need to go out and support our customers. And that's a two-way kind of street there, that if they can support our customers will support them. And I know that especially over the last 2 years, there's been more and more conflict between people in general. I think people have been on edge. Everyone's been scared. Everyone's been feeling rubbish. And that has really affected how we treat each other. Face covering exemptions and social distancing, and sometimes the inability to use or to do those things have caused a lot of conflict. And it's not just de-escalating the situation. And what we're doing in CPC this year is bringing it down to basics. And we're just talking about what their roles and responsibilities are and what part of those roles is prioritized over everything else. So the things in that are prioritized over timekeeping, over sticking to schedules, over this, over that, is that it's the customer service, it's the customer care that is the main priority. And that's regardless of disability. That's how everyone should be treated. And that's really what we're looking into currently as a bit of a de-escalation from the horrendous couple of years that we've had now. Getting back to normal, getting back to an inclusive city, kind of in Edinburgh, especially for us.
Thanks, Olivia. Robert, can you say any more about the CPC training and how FirstBus kind of go beyond those minimum requirements and what you're doing there?
Yeah, so the CPC training, I would echo what Olivia says. The CPC training covers it to a certain degree, but like I say, with our Journey Makers programme, the accessibility element is just one module of it. I believe we're now up to 6 modules or something. But what I would say from a FirstBus perspective is that absolutely everything within every one of the modules places the customer at the heart of everything that we do. So whether that is the basic customer service training, such as a greeting when you board, a thank you when you get off, alongside all of the other parts that go with it, we advise drivers to kind of be as helpful as much as possible. But like Olivia says, there are other things to consider, such as, you know, timekeeping, safety on the road, that sort of thing. And drivers have got a very fine balance to try and strike to kind of meet everything all at the one time. But what I would say is that we do ask drivers, where possible, if there is something that has happened during the course of the journey, if there's a way they can try and be helpful to resolve it there and then it helps smooth the customer experience. If, however, it's an issue that can't be resolved immediately, then they do have the tools in place to direct customers into a support centre, so that obviously, you know, things can be investigated more formally, and we can take then learnings from that out of the back of it. I think what's important though is that in terms of what we do, modules and things are great, and you know that it gives a regular drumbeat for the drivers to tap into, and it reinforces the messaging continually in terms of what makes a great customer journey and how the driver can be a part of that. But I think there's a little bit of drivers need to be supported as well. So we try and do little positive things. So for example, we have something called a Monday Maker, where every Monday from somewhere in the business, the spotlight will be focused on a driver. And it might be that they have given an example of a great passenger experience, and that is then shared through various communications throughout the business, whether it be the colleague app, notice boards. Of a prime example of great customer service, and therefore by shining the light on that example, other drivers, not just waiting to go through a training process, but from day to day and week to week, learn from that process. So it's a regular drumbeat all the time that the customer is the centre of the journey process, and therefore everything we do within the business should be reflective of that.
Yeah, I can completely agree with Robert that what we're focusing on this year as well in the CBT is in the CBC is our drivers looking after their own mental health and how we can support them with that. Because a massive thing is that if your staff and your colleagues are happy, they treat your customers so much better. And you know how it is. You know, if you're in a bad mood and you're coming onto a bus and you don't say hi and thank you to the driver, then it just becomes a bit of a vicious circle, and that goes back and again. And so we're really taking a focus on, and our CPC is about how actually the business is really supporting the drivers at the moment, and what we're doing to keep them kind of supported and content in their roles. And hopefully we will start to see some changes in the interactions with our customers as well.
Great. Thank you for that. We had asked some attendees to submit their questions in advance of today. Quite a lot of the questions that we got were around passenger assistance and what providers' policies are in different scenarios. And I suppose what people want to know is about what are staff trained to do, or what can passengers expect staff to do in different situations. So, for example, deploying a ramp has been mentioned a couple of times by different people, not just on a bus situation, but also on trains. People saying that often they have to sort of barter and argue with the staff to be able to get the ramp deployed. It's not something that happens automatically. So there's a question about, if somebody requests a ramp to be deployed, should the driver do that, or is there any kind of negotiation involved? Can anybody say any more about what the situation is for that kind of thing?
I think Robert and I will be on the same page here. 100% is there for any customer that requires it. You know, there's old myths that it's just for wheelchair users, and it's absolute rubbish. That the ramp, it's part of our PSVAR kind of requirements. It is there for anyone who needs it, rain or shine. Drivers should be and will be deploying the ramps for any customer that requires it. I mean, you could run up to a bus stop and then ask for the ramp to be deployed, and it should still be put down for you. There's no question.
That's it in a nutshell. As I say, Olivia is correct. You know, the ramp is there to aid boarding and alighting. It doesn't have to be just, for example, a wheelchair user. It could be someone unsteady on their feet that has a rollator, or, you know, maybe, you know, they're even just slightly unsteady on their feet. You know, they need a walking aid, like a walking stick or something. There's no preconditions into why the ramp should or shouldn't be deployed. If you need the ramp, you can ask the driver should deploy the ramp. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and any complaints or feedback that we ever get from customers saying that that's not happening, to us, that shows a gap in our drivers' knowledge. So that feeds back into our CPC and our driver training. It's really fluid. What we hear from our customers about that isn't happening, that drivers aren't understanding, brilliant. We'll make sure that we roll that information back out in any form that we can across all of our garages. Because you know, we can only assume that it's a gap in drivers' training.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for that. Some of the other questions that we received were about, and I think we've talked about some of this already, about hidden disabilities and stigma and perceptions of disabled people. And there were some people who told us of incidents where they felt that they had been judged in advance of making a journey. For example, there's one disabled person here who said that they had a first class ticket, but the staff assumed because they were disabled they wouldn't have a first class ticket and didn't seat them in a first class carriage. So I suppose our question is more about the training and how that covers things like disability etiquette, equal treatment of disabled people. Can anybody say a little bit more about what your organisation does in those circumstances to make sure that that gets across Claire, do you want to come in, or Cheryl, or Billy?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, so one of our training outcomes that I spoke about earlier specifically focuses on challenging misconceptions about disabled people, and is basically asking staff to consider their attitudinal barrier to access and inclusion. So although we don't prescribe how that is done, it's very much, you know, the onus is on the rail operator to go about delivering those outcomes. But I've attended various training delivered by rail operators. So for example, they often show a video in a kind of classroom environment, and you know, you're asked to observe various different behaviours which happen in a station, and more often than not, the learners or the rail staff will feed back what their interpretation of the issue is, and often it's the wrong issue, that they've completely kind of misjudged it, and it really highlights that behavioural bias and attitudes that people have towards visible and non-visible disabilities. So that's been a great way of kind of getting across that message to rail staff.
Great, thanks, Claire. Anybody else want to come in on that point, or will I? Olivia,
Hi Emma. Yeah, I would just like to say that's kind of the key thing with us about the Sunflower Lanyard scheme. So it's a really great way for anyone travelling with hidden disabilities to have something visible on them that allows staff to identify that they might have potentially some additional needs or requirements, or they may need to be slightly more patient or adjust you know, how they might approach that passenger. And by us having the badges as well on the other side, it does mean that people can confidently approach members of staff so that they know they will understand the requirement. In terms of treatment, anyone that books assistance with us, the first question that the assistance team will ask them is, how do you want us to help? So if that is helping from the car park, you know, anyone that's booked assistance usually does go to the front of check-in queues through the fast track security, just to minimise all the stress of those processes. If that's what they're looking for, that's what they'll get. If they arrive and decide, you know what, Inverness is quite a small airport, I want to get through all the processes myself independently, and if you can just help me onto the aircraft, then that's absolutely fine too. So we make sure that it is tailored, and all hidden disabilities, the obviously wide variety that are there, are all covered within the awareness training, and all the different ways to approach potentially, depending on what the different hidden disability might be, so that our staff across the whole airport feel confident in being able to provide the best service that they can.
Okay, thanks, Cheryl. Billy, you have your hand up. Did you want to comment on that point?
Myself, Emma, or Billy?
No, sorry, Billy Hendren, you had your hand up. Unless, Billy, you had something to add.
Yeah, sure. You know, so I can echo what the rest of the team are saying here. You know, we've got sort of luxury sometimes where we've got sort of 2-hour loading window, but we use our booking system, which has been upgraded to, you know, request any sort of assistance needed when we're loading the ships. Also, as I mentioned before, we were introducing the Welcome Me app, which is another part of that where it drills down into actually advising the customer service. Oh, sorry, Billy. And sorry, you know, and we're going to be using that more because, you know, it's got a sort of wide range, and it can advise the business itself here, you know, what the exact needs are, and you know, so, and we keep moving forward with that, you know. But yeah, we're lucky, you know, like the buses there, we've got a 2-hour window to actually load the boat, and you know, it makes it a lot easier to sort of facilitate these things.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Billy. So, Billy Hendren, did you want to?
Can I actually ask my question?
You can, yes.
Aye,
go ahead.
No problem. It's a question to the last. It's a question from the last. It's a question for the last from the airports, and it's regarding the security checks. Now, back when I was going abroad, one thing that I found pretty stressful is the fact I walk with a long cane, and I found it pretty stressful that the security officer had to x-ray my long cane before I could walk through the scanner. Now, I can't walk without that cane. So while that was getting x-rayed, I had to obviously just stand and wait for my cane, and I had to ask said officer to give me my cane back so I could walk through the scanner, because I can't see, I'm visually impaired. So the cane helps me navigate. Some officers were very cooperative. They gave me my cane back, blah, blah, blah. Some weren't. So my main question is, when someone with a visual impairment asks you for their cane back after it's been x-rayed so they can walk through the security scanner, will you cooperate with this question? Will you oblige? Or will you say, no, we're sorry, we can't give you that back? How are we supposed to navigate through a security scanner without our canes?
Yeah, certainly. So it's something that comes up a lot. So we do have spare wooden kind of walking aids that we do hand out in case someone has, for example, a metal walking stick or aid with them. We can't have, unfortunately, anyone going through the screening.
I'm sorry for jumping in here, but you're not getting it. A long cane for the blind is not wooden, and a wooden walking stick doesn't have a roller ball on the end of it. Our long canes are there to help us navigate. So if you're our long canes, we can't move. So
yeah, I absolutely appreciate that. What we do is we would scan it, swab it most likely, and would cater that to yourself to be able to go through. The reason why they need to do that is because the cane would, for example, a metal walking stick, would alarm through the scanners that we have. So it's just to make sure that that item is screened and that we're comfortable with that, just from a security processing point of view. But any items we do have to x-ray, and then it would be of course returned to you. And if you were to book assistance, as an example, the team assists with all that as well, just to make that a slightly easier process for you.
No problem. Thank you for clarifying that.
Thanks, Cheryl. Just on that, actually, there is another question just about progressing through security when you have got medical equipment or anything clinical, and often it can be quite embarrassing to either have to get that out to show people. Is there any way that the airport is considering doing that in a different way that's maybe not quite so awkward for the disabled person?
Yeah, so again, it's one of those things that we do need to screen, everyone and all belongings. However, our teams are trained, so they do know what they're likely to see. We're probably a little more experienced in medical supplies than possibly other larger airports, because a lot of our passengers might be travelling from the kind of island airports for hospital appointments. So we do see a lot of medical supplies, so our teams are quite familiar with that. So they are aware of the variety that they might come across. They are aware of anything medical that someone might have on their person as well. So anything that might trigger an alarm, anything that can actually go through the scanners as well. So they have a really good awareness of what's out there and the best way to handle that. And of course, the main and key point of the training is to handle that discreetly. And there is always the option of requesting a private search if there is something that you do find embarrassing and you don't want to be in kind of public view. And our team are always really accommodating of that. So we do have a private search area for anything that might be considered to be more embarrassing for the passenger.
Thank you, Cheryl. We're slowly running out of time, or quickly running out of time. Just a couple of other things I wanted to get to today, though. We've had a couple of questions come in around the topic of accessible and inclusive information, whether that's getting information about a journey or journey planning, perhaps an easy read, or having websites that are in an accessible format where people can give feedback or complaints. Can anybody say anything from the panel about how inclusive communication is covered within staff training? Anybody want to come in?
I can.
Thanks, Olivia.
Surprisingly enough. Yeah, so we, especially our customer services and our retail team, we let them know what we have got in place in terms of accessible digital assets so that they can help guide any customers that maybe call or email to ask about assistance with that. But we do also appreciate that often the customers we find hardest to reach with information are those that then become most vulnerable and most isolated, especially in Edinburgh when it comes to disruptions and diversions. So although these are regularly updated on socials and they're also regularly updated on our website, what our staff are also aware of is that anyone can directly message me, and I add a lot of organisations to almost like a bulletin that I put out. So if there's an organisation that helps people in isolated areas or with specific disabilities and they communicate in a different way, like a group phone call, letters, newsletters and things like that, then I will regularly send out new information of updates, diversions, disruptions, so that they can trickle it down to their service users in the way that suits them best, because we aren't able to put a little note through everyone in Edinburgh's door the day before some horrendous roadworks start up. But if I can get that information out to organisations as quickly as possible, then they are really, really helpful to me. They really help me in sharing that information with volunteers, staff and service users in whatever way is appropriate for that group of people. And we make sure our retail and our customer services team know about that in terms of staff training, so that they can direct people, and email addresses can be added to my ever-growing list. And that's a really nice direct communication from the disability department straight out to individuals. And it means that they can contact me directly as well with questions about their local area.
Great. Thank you for that, Olivia. I'm very conscious of time. As usual, we've had loads of questions. Thank you very much, everybody. But we haven't had time to get to all of them. Thank you for your time and your contributions today. We will take all of your feedback and the discussion points and produce a short summary report from today. But as I said, we've got a note of your questions in the chat, and we will put those to the panel after today's session and circulate the responses with that summary report. Also, please do look out for the short feedback survey. It's always great to hear your thoughts so that we can continue to improve these events. So all that remains for me to say is thank you again to all of our presenters today, our panelists. Thank you to our communications team for their help, and to all of you for your time and your efforts today. And we hope to see you again at another one of our webinars very soon. Thanks, everybody.